Good morning. Happy Saturday morning. Good morning. My name's John Bracken. I work at the Knight Foundation, and I am just going to hand the mic over to our newest colleague at Knight Foundation, our new director of journalism, Shazna Nessa, in a moment. So, two changes to your program that you'll know. Fred Dust from IDEO got stuck in the transportation melees yesterday and didn't make it. Justin Farrell from the Stanford D School is with us. Michael Manus is not with us, and Shazna, my new colleague, is. And Shazna's going to take it over.
Thanks, John. That's actually very indicative of what we're going to talk about, which is uncertainty and being okay with uncertainty. I'd love to kick off with some great news that many of you may already have heard. Knight Foundation announced on Friday two very important grants to the D School at Stanford and the new school. Heather Chaplin, on the left here, is the designer of a new program at the new school in New York, which combines design thinking, creative processes with journalism. And Justin Farrell, to my immediate left, is a career journalist, was at the Washington Post for 7 years as director of design and product and mobile, digital design, and was a Knight Fellow. And after his Knight Fellowship at Stanford, he went on to the D School at Stanford and redesigned their fellowship program. And we're going to talk about some of the work we're doing. So I'd love to kick it off first with a little exercise that is very common at the D School that Justin is going to lead.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here, and excited to be here with you and you. And I feel we're like the Wizard of Oz over here. You guys stare at the screen, and we're like the people behind the curtain over here in the corner. How many of you are familiar with design thinking? Okay, great. All right, we're speaking to the choir, so to speak. So I'd like to start with a little activity. It's 10 a.m. I'm impressed that there's so many people here. If you could turn to the person next to you, you're going to need a pen and something to write on. It doesn't have to be very big. Go ahead and pull something out to write on. Many of you already have that. I'm going to jump down.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so does everybody have something to write with and something to write on? Okay, cool. So find a partner, just pair up with somebody next to you. This is what I would like you to do. I'm going to give you 45 seconds to draw a portrait of your partner. 45 seconds. Ready? Go. Thirty more seconds. Come on, you guys have deadlines. $15 seconds. Five, four, three, two, one. Okay, everybody stop. Now I want you to share your drawing with the person that you drew. Go ahead and share it.
Oh yeah, we should have done it.
Okay, awesome. So how did that feel? How did that feel? Just call it out. How did that feel? It felt awful, right? What else? How did that feel? Embarrassing. Yeah, I heard some apologies over here. What else? How did that feel? It was delightful. Yeah, right? So it's all those things wrapped into one. Here's the reason why I like to do that. That was an exercise that was developed by one of the founders of the product design program at Stanford way back a long time ago. And the reason why we like to do that is because if you ask a room full of adults, let me ask you now, how many of you think of yourselves as creative? Okay? Usually in a room full of adults, only about half the people will raise their hand. And a lot of adults who don't think of themselves as creative, it goes back to a time when maybe you were 8, 9 years old and somebody told you you couldn't draw. Or some other activity, usually in school, maybe your clay ashtray that you were making for your parents wasn't as good as the kid sitting next to you. You guys remember when we made ashtrays for, anyway. I just turned 40, so I'm trying to reminisce. But some other artistic endeavor. Usually it comes from something that, you weren't very good at artistically, and so you opted out of feeling like a creative person. At the D School at Stanford, we believe that everyone is creative, and wildly so. And that artistic ability is only one aspect of creativity, but other aspects of creativity are your willingness to try something that you might not be good at, your ability to show unfinished work, your ability to, take something on in a short amount of time. Basically all the things that you guys just did by participating in this activity, and it has nothing to do with your drawing. But those little personal risks that you take just doing this, as you go through and continue to do more and more and take more and more personal risks, that's how you come up with really creative ideas, right? It's trying things that are uncomfortable and getting comfortable being uncomfortable. All right, so we're going to launch in now. I'm going to turn it over to Shazna. Thank you, guys.
So I know many of you put your hands up that you're very familiar with, or you're familiar with design thinking, but I would really love to sort of throw to Justin and to Heather. We've been hearing this buzz term, design thinking, creative processes, human-centered design, all have existed for a while, but have really sort of surfaced in the last few years. What the hell is it? How would you encapsulate what it means? Maybe Heather.
Sure, I'll jump in there. First of all, I'm super psyched to be here and be here with you guys, and it's really exciting that so many people came out. We were sort of expecting this Saturday morning 10 people to show up. So my background is as a reporter. I've been a reporter for 20 years. I don't have a design background or training, but I covered video games for a long time. And basically, I guess there would be three things I would say that really interest me about design and that make it seem like something that's important to bring into journalism practice. And the first is a very pragmatic understanding of how complex the media ecosystem that we operate is now, right? It's no longer newspapers competing with newspapers or even news competing with entertainment, but we're now competing with participatory culture and people communicating with each other, right? So it's a vastly complex system. And the thing that I learned about designers is that they're really good at systems thinking, which is understanding the way the whole works and understanding that a whole is made up of many interconnecting parts, and each one of those parts is dynamic and is moving, right? So that's a totally different way of thinking than as journalists, most of us learn to think, well, this, then this, then this, linear. So it's like a network idea instead of a linear idea. So I think if we are going to keep journalism alive, let alone flourishing in the future, we have to understand the ecosystem that we're operating, and it's complex, and systems thinking and design can help us grapple with complexity. So that is just like the number one context for me that design is important in. And then the second thing is sort of this creative idea that if we're going to understand this ecosystem and rethink where does journalism exist in it, and what should it look like, and what should it feel like, and how do we create news experiences for people that will actually engage them in this hyper-competitive attention economy, we're going to have to be creative, and we're going to have to invent the news products, forgive the business jargon, of the future. And then the third thing that interests me about design is really this idea of good designers start with who am I designing for and why, right? So this idea that we're trying to do at Journalism and Design in the New School is kind of start the journalism process with saying, who's your community? Who are you designing for? Who are you reporting for? Go out, listen, observe, pay attention to those people, find out what their needs are, what their problems are, and that is the beginning of the reporting process. And that's something that I feel like designers are really good at, and maybe journalists are a little less good at. So for me, I've been thinking a lot about what would human-centered journalism kind of look like when we put the people that we're serving at the center of the project.
So one example we talked about earlier was data journalism, and particularly around data applications and a lot of interactive graphics, which are actually very human-centered. And Justin, you were the digital director at the Washington Post for 7 years. And could you talk a little bit about sort of the transition from a visual designer to a design thinker, from a from a print journalist to a digital journalist?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I actually had like 7 different jobs in 7 years. They didn't know quite what to do with me. But yeah, at the end, I was leading digital design, and my background actually is in print design, and I spent many years designing newspapers, and was involved in S&D and that great community. And for me, there was no better training for learning how to communicate with people from different disciplines within a newsroom. My job as a designer of the newspaper was often to get reporters and editors and photographers and graphic artists to work together to come up with something that they wouldn't be able to come up with on their own, and then for me to put it in the paper in the right place and get it out to the users, to our readers. I didn't think of it as product design, but that's really what it was, day in, day out product design on deadline. And so it was very important to build strong relationships with people in order to have the trust, in order to be able to create things together, and instead of sort of sticking with your own discipline. Around the time when the internet was happening, there was a time when a lot of people in the print design community, we were all concerned about what was happening, and the talk in our community was like, should we become web designers? Like, should we go learn HTML and CSS? And I remember there was this great blog post at the time written by Coy Venn, and some of you probably know Coy. He was the design director for NewYorkTimes.com for many years. And he wrote this post that said, a lot of my friends in print design are asking what it takes to become a web designer. Here's the difference between print design and web design. Print design is fundamentally about narrative. You are pulling together the elements, creating elements in the interest of the story. You're designing it on a page in order to guide people through that story. You want them to read the narrative, right? And in some cases, really long story, like we had a lot of at the Washington Post. You're like building in white space, and you're applying, traditional graphic design principles in the interest of getting people through the narrative. Web design is entirely different, Coy said. It's about behavior. It's not about narrative. You're not trying to guide them through something. You're trying to design for them to be able to go where they want to go. And I didn't quite understand that at the time, but actually over the years that has meant more and more to me, and has sort of transcended beyond print design and web design to really be about the changes happening, I think, in our society and how organizations function and the nature of leadership and things like that. And what I mean by that is that, newsrooms traditionally are extremely hierarchical. You can't get much more hierarchical. You have editors and deputies and assistants, and everything is hierarchical. But we're increasingly living in a non-hierarchical society, right, where people have incredible user choice. And so the difference between creating systems where you are predetermining an outcome and assembling people to achieve that outcome in the most efficient way possible, to now you may not know what the outcome is going to be. I mean, if it's truly something unique, if it's truly a disruptive innovation, right, then if all you're going for is what you think you want at the outset, then that's the best you're ever going to achieve. So how do you create systems where people can come up with unimagined outcomes, right, that are from the bottom up? And to me, that's been the real transition for me in my career. That's kind of what led me to the D School.
And Heather, you're going to be diving, you've already started, how many classes are there now at the New School in your program?
Well, it's a little bit of a complicated question. We have 6 new classes and then classes that we pull from around the university. At the New School we have Parsons, which is this world-class design school, and we have Eugene Lang, which is this fantastic liberal arts school. So one of the things that we're doing is pulling classes that kind of already exist as well as inventing new classes.
And could you talk about some of the new classes that you're inventing, and also this idea of having design experts embedded in the classroom?
Yeah, and if I might, I'll pick up on what Justin was saying about this idea of behavior that really resonates with me. And sometimes I joke, mostly just to get a rise out of people, but that everything I needed to know about the future of journalism I learned from game designers. But this idea of, so I feel like my job in creating this program is essentially a design experience, and really what I'm doing is trying to design a context in which interesting behaviors will emerge and in which new ideas will emerge. And it very much is, I don't know what the results will be, because that is what we're doing, is we are trying to create an environment where we bring together what's important about journalism, right? It's the values, it's being independent, it's verifying things, it's speaking truth to power, all of these things that all of us got into journalism to be in the first place. But then how do we stay alive in the future? And that's going to be about being creative and about coming up with things that we can't imagine yet. So one of the things that we're doing to kind of foster this and shake things up that we seem to be having some success with so far in the classroom is we've designed these new classes, and thanks to the Knight Foundation, we're able to embed people with different skill sets and different mindsets in the classroom. So it's not just me, who I'm 40, and I started off at a shitty newspaper and then became a magazine writer, and I know how to do what I know how to do. I have a designer in my classroom. We're working with people from IDEO as well as people from Parsons. I have a social media editor in my classroom, and I have a data reporter in my classroom. And again, it gets back to this holistic thing of thinking in systems, in that journalism is not you have to know data over there and social over there, but these are the things that are what it means to do journalism today, and let's just make a whole out of it and introduce that to students right away. And then the other thing I would just say is that, you know, our classes are very unusual. So I'm debuting one of our first, it's called News, Narrative, and Design. And the new school has a brand new cafeteria. So that's not interesting to you guys, but to my students, that's their community, that's what's interesting. The new school's never had one place for everyone to go. So we didn't start the class with come and tell me your story ideas. We started the semester with go to the cafeteria and listen and observe. And actually the first exercise I had everybody do was draw a map of the cafeteria. Tell me what you see. And it was, at first, they just looked at me like I was freaking crazy. They were like, I'm taking a journalism class. Why are you giving me a drawing exercise? And then they got so into it, and when they came back, everybody had seen something different, which was fascinating. So we started off with listening. We started off with what are the needs of the people in the cafeteria? Is the cafeteria meeting the needs? And then I kind of freaked the students out because I basically set a bunch of criteria and sort of constraints, right, for them to push against, but the idea was really you're going to be graded on how much you push yourself and coming up with ideas that I've never come up with before. And it's been very interesting to watch them grapple with the uncertainty of like, I don't know what the assignment is, except that you need to meet the needs of the people in the cafeteria, and we're going to do it in a way that they will actually engage with and will actually have impact.
And I wanted to also just continue on that thread. As you've been developing your program, what are the obvious affinities that you see between journalism and these creative processes?
That's a great question. I mean, the thing that struck me, one of the things that struck me so much about design is how much overlap there already is between the journalistic process and the design process, except in journalism we don't really talk about process. So this idea of listening, which is like, you know, so if you see the little hexagons, right, the sort of, it's become so trendy, the, you know, design thinking hexagons, that starts with empathy, which is listening, and really that is what good reporting starts with. It's just, I find that it's a helpful, design offers helpful methodologies and processes for bringing imagination and creativity into the journalistic process. And the thing that I've found really interesting in the classroom is I don't stand up and say, now we're gonna learn about design. Here's design and you have to understand X, Y, Z. We just start doing design exercises and we just start approaching things in this new way. And it seems really intuitive for people. And even if you just see the way everybody kind of came to life with the exercise that Justin did, that's what my classroom is like. It's not me talking and them sitting. It's like an act. We're engaging with each other, and more learning happens that way.
Yeah, I would add, just to build on that, so we distinguish between what we call big D design and little d design. And big D design is you know, people who do design for a living, graphic design, product design, industrial design, all of those things. At the D School, we primarily teach design methodology to people who are not designers. So one of the things that's special about the D School is we're an interdisciplinary institute. We're not actually a school. You can't apply to the D School. We don't have degrees. We teach elective courses to anyone who gets into a Stanford graduate program. And so we are a crossroads on campus. We're the only place on campus where students from all 7 graduate schools come together and take classes. So my experience there as a Knight Fellow at Stanford was I was a a journalism fellow, and I was, on project teams with an MBA and a medical student and, someone who was a CS master student from the School of Engineering. And because we have different ways of viewing the problem, we have a much higher likelihood of coming up with a unique solution because we're approaching it from different angles. And all too often, we hang out with people who are similar to us. It's easy for me to hang out with designers and we geek out on the same stuff and all of that. But if you're only with and working with people who are similar to you and want to make a similar change in the world, you're much more likely to come up with incremental ideas than you are with truly out-of-the-box ones. And so if you can get together people who are specialists in different areas and then make them comfortable working together, that's sort of the secret sauce.
Yeah, the collaboration is something that we're also really working with in the classroom that I think is a little bit different about the way our program is run. Is right from the beginning they're working in teams and we're trying to help them understand what makes collaboration work, what makes it not work. My class is, and this is kind of experimental, but I'm teaching this journalism class, and then at Parsons there's an editorial design class, and our classes are meeting together and we put them up in teams to see what they can come up with, and we talk a lot about bridging. To me, one of the most important things that journalists need to know is how to speak other languages. So it's not that I expect every student that comes out of the class to be brilliant at data visualization and a brilliant designer and a brilliant coder and blah, 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 but they have to know enough of all of these different things to be able to speak the language and to say, I'm good at this, how do I find somebody else who's good at this other thing?
Yeah, I mean, we're just going on here.
Sorry.
I don't know if you have other questions. The design thinking is like we mentioned, is a process. It's not competitive with your expertise. Like it's dependent upon your expertise, but then it's about how do you engage with other people who have different expertise? What's the way you go about that, right? And so one of my pet peeves I was telling them before is people will come to us sometimes and they'll say, oh yeah, the design thinking thing, I've done that. Now I'm into lean or agile or whatever, right? And we're not competitive about processes. Like, use whatever process is right for you in the right time. But saying that you've been exposed to this and so you don't need it anymore is akin to saying, like, I've played tennis before, but that doesn't mean that you're Roger Federer, right? This is something that, like, I learn all the time, and I work there, right? We're all learners. And so it's meant to be a resource, a way of working. One of my colleagues there at the D School, Michael Deering, likes to say that we're not teaching like quantum physics. We're not trying to impart information to you. In fact, we don't have auditorium seating. We would call this setup kind of the sage on stage. It's not about like, here's all the wisdom I'm going to impart, take it and go forth, right? It's about teaching as facilitator and unlocking a way of working. Michael likes to say that what we're doing is not something that we're putting into you. It's actually about how we scrape other behaviors off. That the way that we want to engage with each other face to face, the way that we want to create rough prototypes of things is innate, right? And yet there are all these behaviors and systems and in a lot of cases schooling that taught us that it's uncomfortable to try things out when you don't know what the answer is, right? And so we're trying to scrape off some of that or get people, again, to be comfortable being uncomfortable in order to be able to engage in this way and make the most out of what everyone brings to the collaboration.
And how concretely would you, in an ideal world, imagine such a collaboration in a newsroom? Does that mean there's a business person at every editorial meeting, for example? What does that look like? What are some things that we can all be thinking about and going back to our newsrooms and trying?
Yeah. So not to like get into specifics because everybody's situation is different, but I think newsrooms and editorial, in my experience, work a lot this way anyway. I mean, again, it was like in my life at the Post, designers played this role a lot. I mean, you were the ones that had to bring together the multidisciplinary group because you were dependent on their work in order to do yours, right? But the difference is, it's not about everybody coming together in order to get their piece of the pie. Right? David Kelly, who's the famous founder of the D School and founder of IDEO, likes to talk about how for years at Stanford they talked about professors and departments doing multidisciplinary collaboration, but what that really meant was that somebody got a grant And then everybody came together and said, I want this piece of it, and everybody got what they wanted, and then they went back and did what they wanted to do, right? Because it's too hard to work with somebody else. The way we mitigate that, and really the core of the process is, you're not coming in there to focus on what you want to do or what you think is best. You're focused on the person you're designing for. This is the human-centered design piece. So if you have a group of people who are very different, you have someone from business development and someone from advertising and an editor and a reporter, and they're already a little bit nervous about working with each other and not quite sure where the trust is, and so you want to facilitate a way to increase that trust between them. But they're not focused on their own deliverables. They're focused on the person they're designing for, the customer, the end user. And it's so much harder to sort of be selfish and even to be afraid, right, when you're focused on creating something for someone else, when you're really trying to create something that they need and that's meaningful and useful to them. It's much easier to act that way and to not collaborate if you're focused on yourself. And so human-centered design unlocks that for people.
And we talked about some of those similarities between journalism and design thinking. Heather, I wonder if you could talk about some of the tensions as well that you've noticed, and obviously Justin too.
Right, so like I said at the beginning, I've been a reporter for 20 years, so I was born not believing anything anybody ever told me. And so I've been working on this program for a while now, and I'm at, when you've been thinking about something for a long time, at first you're like, this is the answer. And then you're like, oh, that's not the answer. That's stupid. What are you even talking about? So I'm kind of at that stage in my process where I'm like challenging myself about why I'm doing this. So the skepticism thing is something I think about a lot, and the way I sometimes think about it is, when you meet a really good reporter and they're watching you, and they're watching you with these like shrewd eyes, and you just know that they're just listening for any discrepancy or any bullshit that might be coming out. And when you meet designers,
yeah, exactly. I see some of those people.
When you meet designers, they're looking at you with like these wide open eyes, like, wow, what wonderful things you have to tell me. So I think about that sometimes as being the tension point. It's this difference. It's the way I think about it is skepticism and compassion. And I like to think we need both in journalism, and again, to kind of take journalism, or I think there's a big umbrella for journalism now, but the kind that I'm interested in has more compassion than probably the kind I practiced mostly in my life. But I definitely see that as something we need to keep thinking about, because we can't lose the skepticism, right? Because we all talk about engaging with our communities, but sometimes the people in your communities are embezzling funds or molesting children or starting wars, right? So we have to keep that part alive too. And then the other thing I think about is, mostly my sense is design processes have been used to create commercial products to sell to people, and if you're a skeptical reporter like me, you might have looked at that from the outside and been like, well, I don't want to be part of creating stuff for people that they don't really need, but taking advantage of our insights about them to make them think they need it, right? So and as journalists, we think of ourselves as doing this public good, so how can we kind of take these skills and merge that? That's something I find people push back against a lot.
Yeah, I want to tell a quick story about sort of how I transitioned from the Post to the D School, and it was primarily through the Knight Fellowship was the opportunity, and I think Jim Bettinger's in here. Thank you, Jim. There he is. Talk to him later. It's awesome, incredible program. The thing that happened for me was it was always my dream to work at the Post. I always wanted to work with those journalists, and I got to work with really amazing people there. And in my last year there, I was the digital design director at the time when the iPad came out. And so, they came to the design team and said, we need to see what the Washington Post iPad app might look like. And there were a bunch of us working on it, Sarah Samsel and Catherine Zaleski and many others. And we had this idea about what it could be, and what we thought, this was around the time of the Gulf oil spill. And so that was our mock-up story. And what we thought was that, with any big story, you're going to get the Post journalism. You're going to get the reporting and the video and all of that. But we really wanted to give you also the conversation that was happening around that. And so our very simple concept was, what does a Twitter publication look like? And so what we came up with was we thought it was 3 feeds, right? It was your own feed, the user's feed, so they could talk about the news with their friends and their followers. It was the posts feed that's like specific to that. So in this case, it was like Post Green with the environmental reporters who were covering that. And then we contracted at the time with a company called Sulia that would provide us with informed tweeters around a certain number of big news topics every day. So in the Gulf oil spill, you might get, ecology professor from Tulane who's like out at the site, or people who would share what they thought was happening and links that then users could follow to get this complete holistic picture. You would still get all of the post journalism, right? Well, everyone loved this idea at the beginning. We had this business development model. It was a waterfall model. You would bring a new idea to this room, and you'd have people there from every different constituency, and you would try to make the case for the market and for your intended user, which of course is really hard to do with a new device and you're not sure who your user is. It's hard to articulate something that doesn't yet exist, and yet that was the process that we had. Everyone really liked it at the beginning, but you had to make the case for the limited resources from IT and all of that in order to build this thing. And so every week as we went to these meetings, we got a little bit more risk averse, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure everyone here has been in brainstorming sessions. If you've ever had the experience of being in a room with, even 20 people, which is way too many, 19 people love the idea. It only takes one person to say, let me just play devil's advocate for a minute, right? And what happens? The idea's gone, right? And this wasn't anybody's fault. This was just the process that we had, right? And so what happened was, as we moved closer and closer to putting that app out in the world, we got more and more risk averse, and we made that experience very secondary and basically created a reader of our content on that device. Well, right around that time, Flipboard launched, right? And this was the epiphany for me, because this was essentially a Twitter publication on the iPad. Now again, we didn't have the same idea for the beautiful design that they had, which was really what people responded to initially. But what I realized in that moment was, it wasn't that we didn't have the talent inside the building to create something new like that. It wasn't that we didn't have the ideas. It was that we didn't have the organizational structure. We didn't have a way to take risk to create these new types of products and experiences for people. And to make matters worse for me, then I was in charge of the relationship with Flipboard. We put the Washington Post magazine on it, and I thought, we're pitching our content to other people who are creating these things. How can we create a model that allows us to come together and share these out-of-the-box ideas that we can't quantify right now, but gives us a way, a checks and balances to see how it goes all along with rapid prototyping and all of those things. And they're doing that now. I mean, they're doing that now. It takes time for an organization to change like that. But to me, that's what led me to go out to Stanford. I read about David Kelly and Fast Company and how he was bringing together different groups, and they created a risk-taking model with rapid prototyping that was focused on the user, and that's what I think I wanted to bring back.
Can I jump in there? I mean, it's interesting. We were talking about this a little bit at breakfast. Jess and I discovered we use almost the same phrase, which is this idea of helping people be comfortable with discomfort. And I often find myself thinking that really my central challenge with this program is a psychological one rather than a skills one, which is, how do you help people be comfortable with taking risk and be comfortable with the fact that they're jumping into the unknown. When you're doing something that hasn't been done before, you're trying to come up with new ideas, you don't know where you're going. And I can say from experience, now that I am teaching in a new way and directing a new kind of program, I'm scared all the time. I have a huge stomach ache before class. Every class, I'm just sweating, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So I get it, but one, that's how new and exciting things happen, is by being sort of willing to go to this risky place. And it's, I don't want to be all touchy-feely, but it's about letting yourself be vulnerable, right? And admitting that you don't have the answer and that you don't know what it's going to be. You have constraints, So the constraints I give my students is, well, this is what journalism, these are the things you can't let go of, right? The verifying, the making sure you're being accurate, things like that. But other than that, go out there. And how do you feel comfortable with that? And the fact is, we've transitioned into an era of transition, right? So every day there's something new that you have to deal with. So knowing how to be comfortable when faced with something you don't understand is inherently scary to people, and how do we help people overcome that? And just, to me, again, I come from game design, and I did a lot of research and study about play. And play is another thing that I think designers are better at, that journalists right now, and I'm really trying to predicate my whole program on sort of an ethos of play, not as a juvenile activity, but play as a strategy for navigating unknown environments, right? So like babies know how to play because they've never been in the world before. So like it's testing boundaries. And so I would just ask everybody, can we think about play in sort of this new way to actually help us be successful adults in this terrifying time of change that we live in?
I think before we take it to questions, we're really excited to see what you guys do and come up with, and how we can take further journalism and its mission. Could you perhaps each of you tell us one thing that we should know about your plans with the new school and the D School?
Sure. So we're adding a couple of fellows to the fellowship program that I run, which is an interdisciplinary program. It's for people who are expert in their area but sort of dissatisfied with the ecosystem of it. So we have several fellows now working in K-12 education, others working in healthcare, and now we will have some fellows working in civic innovation, which Knight is very involved in. There's the news challenge around libraries right now. So if you know or you are interested in civic innovation, please let me know, and let's talk about that if you're interested. The other thing is the new thing that we're doing really is this media designers program, and what we're really interested in is not the great idea or the demo day, but the space in between. Right, is how you get from idea to demo day. That's where all the learning actually happens. That's the hardest thing to share. A colleague of mine from the Washington Post, Emmy Kalawale, who's probably here somewhere, she came out and joined us at the D School, and last year launched a website for us called The Whiteboard. And I love this name because she came up with this idea. She was like, it should be like a whiteboard, not a thought leadership. Like, we're not saying, here are the 5 ways to do this, and you guys take it and do whatever you will with it. Again, it's not about like putting something inside. It's about unlocking and facilitating. She's like, a whiteboard is, you throw ideas up and then you erase it, and you throw them up and you erase it. It's never permanent. It's a space for experimentation. And that's really what we're interested in capturing is how do you capture the learning that happens? We have another thing, not to get too jargon. I love when the questions are going to come because you guys are going to be like, all right, cut out all this stuff. Let's get to the real thing here. But we're so focused on innovators, not innovations. And just what we mean by that is that if we had classes where we were like, design the next great iPad app, chances are we would come up with some good ones because we're working with really smart students. Like the Pulse iPad app came out of a D School class. But we're actually focused on the people themselves. If we can give them a process that allows them to bring their whole selves and to focus on who they're designing for in order to come up with new ideas, then their outcomes, their innovations will scale in a way beyond if we were outcome focused in the class itself. So we say innovators before innovations, and this is a way for us to focus on that process. What's the process of the innovator? What are you learning? And how do we share that with the world in a way that's useful for you? So that you don't have to be, on campus at Stanford to experience these methods, but how do we use digital to share that stuff out with the world? And that's what the media design program is going to be about.
So one thing I do try to always say is, so we just launched this fall, and we're beta. We're truly living this idea of like, we're going to learn as we go. We're an iterative program. I think one of the things we're doing that's different also is trying to be really responsive to the needs of our students. And so already we're a month in, and I'm constantly soliciting feedback from the students. What's working? Did that, So I think that the way I think about it is I want to be a place for playful experimentation. I want to bring together the most important values of traditional journalism and open it up to the most playful, anything goes experimentation that we can be. And I want to put out students, the way I think about it is some of my students will become professional journalists in ways that maybe look familiar to us in the room. some of them will be taking, as I hate to use the jargon, but sort of the jobs of the future, or creating the products of the future. And then also, I think it's really important if we all kind of accept that journalism is this messy, participatory thing that it is today, rather than us telling the audience, what to think and what's important, then I think it's really important that, undergraduate liberal art education starts preparing people to be doing acts of journalism, which everybody will be doing at some point in their life. So people are asking me, what jobs are they going to get? What jobs are they going to get? And so I spend a lot of time thinking, can I sleep at night? Am I doing something that is morally right for my students? And when I think about it that way, I feel really good about it. I feel like, A, they're going to get jobs in any kind of career that values creativity, storytelling, rigorous research. I do think that the top slice of them will go on to be, in design language, the change agents, the people who bring real change to our field. But all of them, when it's their moment to be doing journalism, they will know how to do it with rigor and with ethics.
Well, and they're going to create jobs that don't yet exist.
Exactly.
Right?
And again, this gets back to the unknown. It's like,
Yeah.
I get all these questions. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Justin,
That's right.
didn't like most of your jobs in the past decade were ones you invented?
Yeah, the last four, and opportunities that people gave me. The last four jobs I had didn't exist before. There were new positions that were created, which I think is just a sign of the times, right? When I was coming up in journalism, I was very linear. I was like, I want to work at the Post, and then I want to get this job at the Post, and then I want to get this job. And then I realized that none of those things were a given anymore. Yeah. And now it's about how do you for me now it's like, how do I put myself in a position where I want to learn? And then, fortunately, those things have become jobs for me. But yeah, that's what you're doing, right? People are creating jobs around what they know how to do and the needs that they're serving, right? They uncover those needs, and that becomes a job because somebody needs that, and it's meaningful to them. I also just want to call out, too, for Heather. They just launched this program. I don't know if you guys read there's a Fast Company story about it. You should look it up. They just launched this program. They already have students who have declared it as their major. Right?
Yeah,
it's infectious that people want to work this way. I think it's awesome.
It has been amazing to me. So the idea was to start super, almost stealth small, and I wasn't allowed to publicize it to the student population in the spring because of ridiculous state regulations. And we already have 94 students taking our classes, and I think 11 students who have declared as majors. And the school has asked me to double the number of sequenced classes that we're offering next semester. And the admissions people tell me that when they go out, we haven't even started recruiting yet for the specific kind of students we want, but the admissions people, are all over me. They say when they go out and recruit that people are they're insanely excited. So it's like we've tapped into something.
Could you give us a flavor of the types of classes that you've already started teaching?
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting. So one of the other things that the Knight Grant has allowed us to do is, and I think it's an advantage that I've always been a big believer in fresh eyes. Like when I covered video games, I'm not a gamer, so I thought that brought perspective. I'm not an academic. And so what I've only been learning recently is how weird some of the stuff I'm trying to do is, so we're doing a lot. We have our standard, 16-week 4-credit classes, but we're really trying to build up as much of an environment of what happens outside of the classroom as in the classroom. So we have these great pop-up classes. I don't know if John Keefe is in here from WNYC. He's doing essentially a cooking show. It's 12 weeks, it's once a week, it's pass-fail. He shows you something he made, he shows you something digital he made, and he shows you how to make it. So last week, kids were learning how to make conductive dough. But it was just exposure to how a mind like that works and having fun. I see Scott Klein sitting here from ProPublica. He's teaching our first visualizing data class. So one of the things I'm trying to do is I really believe in this idea that it's not you said the sage on the stage, it's over. And part of, I think of my job as being a talent recruiter really, and just trying to go out and be like, who are the most interesting, creative, coolest people out there right now, and how can I expose my students to them and the way they think and what they're actually doing. And that will be an exciting learning environment and inspire them to want to go on and be great at this stuff.
Justin, did you have anything else before we go to
No, yeah, let's
questions?
go to questions.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty now with your questions. Show of hands if anyone has somebody's up there already, please.
Hi, I'm Marie Tessier, work for the New York Times. And one of the most fascinating things for me in design is that Stanford has created a sort of a rubric for finding out if your design is gender responsive. And I would like to hear you talk a little bit about the mind-blowing possibilities of how that opens up worlds for people, and in particular, dev teams. How can we really make our designs responsive so women participate in conversations around the world?
Cool. Yeah, do you mean responsive design like in the web design term or just in general?
Globally.
A little, okay. Yeah, it's amazing the type of sort of behavior that people feel free to undertake when they come into the D School, and I think space has a lot to do with that. And you create an environment where people are not just allowed to act differently, but encouraged to act differently. In terms of sort of like unlocking dead teams, we do a lot of silly stuff. I mean, it's like we do a lot of improv. We always do warm-ups, and the challenge there is actually to make people both unlock their being uncomfortable, like the activity you guys did, right? Did you enjoy that activity, right? You did it because I asked you to, but it wasn't that uncomfortable, right? It was a quick thing. Like, we always start out with stuff like that, and it has to do with sort of loosening people up so they can bring their whole selves. The challenge there as a facilitator is you don't want people to just think the whole thing is goofy, right? Because it's not. It's actually quite rigorous. We apply design thinking to public policy and poverty around the world and all kinds of big complex issues. So I would say there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. The main thing, and maybe this answers your question, maybe a lot, is it's not just about creative thinking. It's actually purposefully separating creative or generative thinking from analytical thinking or abductive reasoning. The reason why the creativity gets so much focus is because almost everybody who comes to us has been rewarded their whole lives for being great analytical thinkers, right? They got into Stanford graduate school because they're very good at like surveying the landscape and coming up with the one right answer. But if we can all agree now that there's not one right answer to a lot of the problems, that there's actually multiple ways to approach these problems, then we also need to work on our generative thinking muscles. And so that's where the sort of brainstorming part comes in. That's where the empathy comes in. So we talk about how you go back and forth between generative thinking and analytical thinking. So people can find their comfort space in order to try things out. Like the engineers are very comfortable with prototyping and analytical thinking, but they'll also participate in the generative thinking because that's part of the process. Yeah.
I'm afraid I was maybe mumbling. I wanted to ask about gender and design.
Oh, gender. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that at all.
Sorry.
Why didn't you guys stop me?
I didn't hear that.
Okay.
I know, amazing.
I was embracing messiness.
So you mean of the people who are participating? We select for diversity, and both gender and yes. Keep going.
Stanford has something about designing projects, designing anything to be gender inclusive.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you all to talk a little bit about why it's important and how mind-blowing it is when you actually include women in conversations at every level, because I think our world needs that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not answering your question very well. To be honest, I think I'm not answering it very well because we just do it. I mean, it's not a thing. I mean, we have as many women as men who take classes at the D School. We have our executive director is a woman.
Back at the Knight Fellowship, I think is Jim in the room? Maybe he has some numbers, but the number of women far outnumber the number of men in my program in the year before as well.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I know, like everyone else, this has been a huge issue in leadership in the for-profit world and in the journalism world, and I can't add much to that other than to say that I completely agree with you. How can you not have, half of the population as involved of every other bit of the population? I mean, again, to me, it's all about the diversity. I'll tell you something that's really interesting. for me that's recently I've noticed is that, so I teach organization design at the D School, and the Fellows Program is really about that. How do you create these types of organizations to come up with these new ideas? And in our organization design class this quarter, we had trouble getting men. It's probably 2 to 1 female in that class. And I don't know why that is, but I can tell you that those women are going to be way better equipped than the men to lead those organizations of the future if I do my job right. And so, yeah, it's hugely important.
Is there somebody else with a question? Yes.
I'm Kate Travis from Science News Magazine. I'm the digital editor, which was a new position with the launch of our new website last year, and I have, just in terms of talking about teams of interdisciplinary people, my team is 3. It's a front-end developer and a web producer, both of which have skills that I can't do. So I have to be, I have to be on my toes in terms of, like, I have to understand what they can do and what the potential is of what they can do, but I can't actually do it. But now my challenge is figuring out how to get that sort of thinking outside of my little team and into my very traditional 10 staff writers, 4 editors, 4 designers, like very, very traditional masthead, and get people to think about it a little bit more. Things like, we recently launched a science visualized page in the magazine, and everybody's like, we're super excited about it. Data visualization, yeah, that's great. And then when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, I know, we can take this data and we can put it in a bar chart. And how do we push that envelope? So I guess I'm asking for practical advice on going back to our newsrooms and creating situations where this innovation can happen.
I would say, to me, the most important thing you could do is focus on the relational, right? So really, encourage the people who are trying things, do it in a face-to-face way and celebrate those early wins, I mean, obviously, this is not an easy thing to do. A lot of you have a lot of tasks that you have to do every day, right? And there's a beast to feed for a lot of you, right? And so how do you carve out the space to also try something different? And I would say, the way to go about that really is to think about what's the lowest prototype? How can you do a rough prototype? So don't take on we're going to tackle the big, this year-long investigative project is all going to be run by design thinking. And that's your first foray into it. Way too much risk, right? So try something small, collect a series of small wins, and start to figure out who your actors are, who are the people who want to work in that way, and then enable them to do more of it, and that's how it scales and grows. It takes time.
I think who your actors are is really key, because when I worked at the AP, I had what I used to call them my Hungry for Change group, and I would identify who at that organization was frustrated, who at that organization really wanted to change things, and we would convene maybe once a week for lunch. And I thought that was really important to keep morale, because you also don't want your best, most creative people going elsewhere. You want to find structures to keep them and to foster that creativity. So identifying who those people are and bringing them together somehow and doing some small projects together, I think is also very infectious. I think when good work happens, other people want to be involved.
I think strategically, one thing we think about at the program is that the edge always influences the center eventually. So rather than trying to go to the people who don't want to change and force them to change, find the people around the edges, work with them, and eventually you'll make inroads.
Yeah, and I think we're close to the end. I just want to say one thing. They'll probably hate this, but talk about working at the edge. I just want to, again, thank Knight Foundation for this opportunity. Obviously, we're a recipient, but John Bracken in particular, John's here somewhere, and Shazna is joining this awesome organization. Experimenting at the edge, right? How many of you are recipients of the stuff that they've been doing? And for us, it's so inspirational. When you're working at the edge and you collaborate and you meet somebody else who's working the edge, you figure out how to work together. Man, it's once you get going, it's really hard to think about working in any other way, and those first steps can be hard. We talk about taking a series of small steps. David Kelly talks about a process called guided mastery. So one step leads to the next step, leads to the next step. But man, once you get going, it'll change the way you think about things. So I encourage you to check out design thinking, and thank you.
Yeah, and before we wrap up, I'm sorry, I see there was one more person. Perhaps we can talk up here at the end. Is that cool? Yeah. Okay. One final thing is a reminder that the Night News Challenge, the next Night News Challenge deadline is September 30th. So if you are interested or are working on your application, to please come talk to us if you have any questions. John Bracken is over here. He also has some postcards with more information about it. The theme is libraries and how do we use libraries, leverage libraries as a platform for knowledge. And obviously many affinities to journalism there, so please come and talk to us about that.
And talk to us about these new programs. There's a lot of work to do. We need your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.